this week I've been, since I'm hosting by myself, getting up earlier and then trying to listen to CNN or MSNBC in the morning as I'm getting ready for work to just get a sense of what the most, mainstream shows are talking about. And they're not talking about this genocide. No. Morning Joe is apparently Biden's favorite show, and they're not talking about it.
They are going to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think this isn't talked about enough. Like, Matt Iglesias knows Joe Biden reads him.
Yeah.
Nate Silver, he knew Obama. This is a conscious thing in our industry, and it fucks people up.
Fox and Friends used to cater to Trump as well. Yeah. Morning Joe's clearly doing that too. So there's so many incentives in media. And I think from the outside, it's difficult for us to understand how intense the pressure is to toe the line. And so this is why Joy Reid deserves a lot of credit, because she's not just done one segment on Palestinians. She's done many. And her show that's on prime time on MSNBC, The Readout. And like we interviewed today, a doctor who has done work in Gaza, like Sam did last week, interviewing a doctor who has done work in Gaza. Last night, Joy Reid interviewed a doctor on her show, surgeon Dr. Irfan Galaria. And he wrote a piece in the LA Times that was headlined, "I'm an American doctor who went to Gaza. What I saw was not war, it was annihilation." This is him describing what he saw in this interview with Joy Reid, and she gets quite emotional at the end of the video.
What I witnessed during 10 days in Gaza was not war, it was annihilation. Joining me now is the author of that op-ed, Dr. Irfan Galaria. And Dr. Galaria, thank you so much for being here. I read your op-ed and it broke my heart, to be honest with you. So I want to allow you to just speak and tell me what you saw and what you experienced in Gaza.
Of course. And Joy, thanks for having me on the show. I understand in war that you're going to have civilian casualties. You're going to have displaced citizens. But it only took us a few minutes crossing into Rafah, Gaza, to recognize and realize what we were really stepping into. Myself and my team immediately recognized that what we were facing was an extraordinary humanitarian crisis. This was unbelievable. Imagine, Joy, almost 1 million displaced civilians struggling for shelter, struggling for food, struggling for water. It was an incredible sight to take in.
And let's talk about inside the hospitals, because we know hospitals have been bombed. They have been invaded in some instances. Are there doctors still operating in these hospitals? Are there emergency rooms operating? I mean, you described these hospitals doubling basically as shelters.
Correct. The entire healthcare system in Gaza is broken. It's utterly collapsed. And let me explain to you the scene of when we first saw the European Gaza hospital. As you drive toward the hospital, you begin to start seeing collections and clusters of tents that start blocking the roads and start clinging to the side of the hospital. Patients were then This is a hospital that was designed to take care for about 300 patients, and yet it was filled with 1,000 patients. And the humanity that you saw outside began to spill into the hallways. People were living in stair corridors, in storage closets. What they would do is hang up a blanket or a sheet to cordon off little areas to create small areas of privacy for them. The hospital was completely overwhelmed. And the physicians and the medical staff, not only were they struggling through all the same things that the rest of the Palestinians were struggling through, but they then were overwhelmed and exhausted. And I'll give you an example. A plastic surgeon who I worked with, he was the only plastic surgeon in the hospital. He was covering it 24/7, and his home was destroyed, and he was living in the hospital during this whole time.
You also describe parents bringing in their children with a hole through the front of their head from sniper fire. So were you seeing a lot of those kinds of victims, children who had been shot by sniper fire?
Correct. You know, myself and my team, we felt there was a disturbingly high number of civilian casualties. We did not feel that there was a distinction being made between targeting terrorists, soldiers, and targeting civilians. And these stories that you just described is what we were hearing and seeing routinely. I was in the hospital. I lived there, literally slept on the floor of the operating room holding area because there's no other place for me to stay. The incident that you're describing was one that happened on a regular basis. On that particular incident, several children were brought in to the hospital with head injuries, and they were cared for by one of the members of our team. It was very disturbing to take care of.
The 1 in 6 children in northern Gaza is severely malnourished, according to UNICEF. Did you see signs of hunger and starvation?
Everywhere. I mean, in the morning, as soon as we left our guest house for the very first day, you see lines collecting around food distribution sites. And in the hospital, almost all the patients were universally cachectic. They had poor nutrition, they were dehydrated. And you know, Joy, this actually contributed to a lot of the medical problems that they were enduring. Because their protein was so poor, because their health was so poor, they weren't able to heal.
Dr. Efron Galaria, thank you for doing what you did and for coming back and telling us what you saw. I appreciate you.
Joy, thank you so much. I wanted to quickly present you with a small gift. This was a stone from the Mediterranean coast that a child handed to me on my final day. Inscribed in Arabic on this says, "From Gaza, with love, despite the pain." And on behalf of the children of Palestine, I'd like to offer this to you.
I am not worthy of having that. I thank you so much. I'm trying not to cry on TV. Thank you. God bless you. I so appreciate that. That means a lot to me. I will keep that as an honor forever. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to share their stories.
Thank you. We'll be right back. We'll be right back.
Hey, as someone who just today cried after interviewing a doctor who was in Gaza, well, in mid-interview, I don't know. It's difficult to...
It's massively important to be using 5 minutes of MSNBC time on this.
I think people should never forget the fact that Joy Reid was, Mehdi Hassan, silenced in my opinion, and he has some exciting projects coming up, but Joy Reid is still there and she has a nightly primetime show on MSNBC, and kudos to her for doing good work and kind of saying what needs to be said amidst a lot of corporate pressure that she must be feeling.
Imagine, there's some people not happy at MSNBC about that sort of coverage.
Yeah, pretty stark contrast there too between the Piers Morgan style and
yes.
that.
I'm not comfortable with the term genocide. Are you? Are you comfortable with it? Like, how about we describe actual reality, and then we can worry about exactly.
Yeah,
it shows the limits of the debate format, as you're saying, RM.
Yeah, absolutely. And the doctor that you just talked to, you're gonna get. To me, that's much closer to real journalism than the kind of blood sport thing that you were talking about, where it kind of to a lot of people who maybe aren't paying attention can be more, a little bit confusing, when you hear from actual doctors who are actually there, it's a little bit more of a direct message, I think.